The cabin lights dimmed as the aircraft climbed steadily into the darkening sky. It was the kind of twilight flight that lulled most passengers into silence, where conversations turned to whispers, and the steady hum of the engines filled the void like a gentle lullaby. The air smelled faintly of recycled coffee, lavender-scented disinfectant, and the faint metallic tang of pressurized oxygen. In row 13, by the window seat labeled 13F, sat a woman who seemed unusually detached from everything around her. She was not restless, not impatient, not absorbed in her phone or a paperback like so many of the others. Instead, she sat with her back perfectly straight, her hands folded loosely in her lap, and her gaze fixed on the clouds rolling below like endless waves of silver foam. To the casual eye, she was invisible, the kind of passenger flight attendants glanced past and other travelers forgot immediately. Yet, her stillness was the sort that drew attention without asking for it. There was discipline in her posture, silence in her breathing, and an odd aura of waiting, as though she knew something no one else on board could possibly understand. The woman's boarding pass read Elena Morris. Her passport, carefully tucked in the inner pocket of her jacket, carried the same name. To the airline, she was simply another American woman in her late 30s, quietly traveling from Denver to Washington, D.C., to the passengers seated near her. She was just the quiet lady by the window, offering polite nods, but never more than a word when addressed. But there were details tiny, nearly invisible, that betrayed something unusual. A sharpness in her eyes, for one. Though she appeared relaxed, her gaze never lingered long. Every few minutes she glanced at the emergency exit doors, then at the overhead bins, then at the seat rows, cataloging faces. To most people, the cabin was a temporary cage in the sky, something to endure for a few hours before stepping back onto solid ground. To her, it was a layout, something to memorize, to know inside and out. The leather bag at her feet was worn, the kind of bag that had been dragged across continents. Unlike the designer handbags and brightly colored backpacks around it, this one bore scars, scuffs from desert sand, scratches from steel corners, and a faded tag stitched crudely on the side, with nothing but the initials FM. She never opened it during boarding. She hadn't even lifted it into the overhead bin. It remained on the floor, upright, as though it were an extension of her presence, never to be parted with. A young man in the aisle seat beside her glanced at her once, then twice, his curiosity stirred by her stillness. He was the type who couldn't sit still, earbuds dangling around his neck, a sports magazine in his hands. After shifting uncomfortably, he decided to break the silence. "First time flying this route?" he asked, leaning slightly toward her. Elena turned her head slowly. Her lips curved in a polite, almost practiced smile. "No," she said softly. Her voice carried a calm resonance, low and even. "I've flown this route before." That was all. No elaboration, no invitation for further conversation. Her eyes returned to the clouds, effectively closing the door on him without slamming it. The young man shifted back, muttering a faint cool, and busied himself with his magazine again. The attendants wheeled past with carts of drinks and pretzels. One stopped at her row, offering the standard choice of sodas and juices. "Water, please," Elena said, her voice controlled. When the plastic cup was placed on her tray, she thanked the attendant with a nod, then folded her hands again. She didn't drink right away. Instead, she studied the reflection in the oval window, her own faint outline against the sprawling dusk. Her face was unremarkable in a way that seemed intentional. Medium-length dark hair, tied back neatly. Minimal makeup. Plain clothes. Dark jeans, a simple gray jacket, and sturdy shoes better suited for walking long distances and making impressions. She was the sort of woman you could pass in a grocery store aisle without a second glance. And yet, There was something about her presence that suggested erasure by design, as if every part of her appearance had been calibrated to avoid attention. But the truth could not be fully erased. Beneath the quiet exterior lay years of muscle memory. Even seated, Elena's posture carried the invisible imprint of countless cockpit hours, the stiff spine of someone accustomed to helmets, oxygen masks, and harness straps pressing into her shoulders. Her hands rested loosely, but her fingers occasionally twitched with small, unconscious motions, as though still adjusting throttles or flicking switches on a control panel. The engines roared faintly louder as the plane leveled off at cruising altitude. Cabin pressure settled. The seatbelt sign dinged off, and passengers stirred with relief, stretching legs and pulling out laptops. Laughter rose faintly from a family a few rows back, while a businessman across the aisle opened his briefcase with the practiced urgency of someone who could never leave work behind. But in 13F, silence reigned. Elena hadn't touched her water. She hadn't adjusted her seat. She hadn't even turned on the overhead light. She simply sat, unmoving, as though waiting for a cue only she could hear. What she didn't know, what no one on board knew, was that elsewhere, hundreds of miles away, her name, or rather her call sign, had begun to stir echoes in long-forgotten systems. For now, though, she remained just a passenger. A woman in 13F, unnoticed, quiet, waiting, and yet, in the hum of the engines and the steady flow of time, one could sense it, the faint thrum of inevitability. Something was coming. Elena's reflection in the window was ghostly, distorted by the faint scratches in the plexiglass. To anyone glancing her way, she looked ordinary, forgettable even. But to herself, that reflection always carried the shadow of another life, a name she hadn't spoken aloud in years. Falcon. It wasn't just a word. It was a piece of her, stitched into her bones, burned into her nerves by the roar of engines and the weight of split-second decisions. Falcon was who she had been at 24, when she climbed into the cockpit of an F-16 for her first operational mission. Falcon was who she had been at 30, flying over landscapes that shimmered with heat and hostility, where every radar ping could mean survival or death. Falcon had been the voice in her headset, the one her squadron trusted in the darkest skies. And Falcon was the part of her that Elena Morris had tried desperately, painfully to bury. She closed her eyes now, leaning her temple lightly against the window. The memories came whether she invited them or not. The academy. The sharp scent of jet fuel clinging to every stitch of her uniform. The early mornings when the Colorado air bit at her cheeks and turned her breath into clouds as she jogged across the tarmac. Instructors barking, classmates laughing nervously, the metallic taste of adrenaline before each simulator run. She hadn't been the strongest cadet, nor the fastest, but she had been the most relentless. Every setback fueled her, every failure sharpened her will. And when she first felt the throttle push her back against the seat, when the earth dropped away beneath her and the horizon curved endlessly, she knew she had found the one thing in the world she could never let go of. She had earned her wings with blood and bone. And with those wings came a call sign. Falcon. It was given to her not because of her sharp vision, though she had that, too, but because she had a way of seeing angles no one else noticed. In combat exercises, she slipped into blind spots, struck from impossible positions, and pulled maneuvers that made even veteran instructors shake their heads. Like a falcon, they said, watching her dive and climb with surgical precision, and the name stuck. The flight attendant's voice pulled her momentarily back to the present. "Ma'am, are you comfortable?" Elena opened her eyes, forced a polite smile. "Yes, thank you." The attendant moved on, leaving her with her ghosts. She took a slow sip of her water, the coolness grounding her, and let her gaze drift again. The missions. She remembered the dust-choked bases overseas, where sand seeped. Into every crevice of machinery, into the stitching of boots, into the lungs of every man and woman waiting for orders. She remembered the smell of burned oil on the runways and the endless drone of generators under the desert sun. And she remembered the nights. Nights when she sat strapped into her cockpit, the canopy reflecting the glow of the moon on barren landscapes. Nights when her radio crackled with coded chatter, when her HUD lit with enemy signatures, when adrenaline drowned out fear. Her squadron had relied on her. Falcon could be counted on to keep calm when others lost control. She didn't flinch. When alarms screamed in her ears, or when tracer fire lit up the horizon. She made choices quickly, cleanly, as if her mind and her aircraft were one. But those choices came with weight. She carried the ghosts of decisions that could never be undone. The friend whose plane didn't return. The convoy that didn't survive. The target hit that she never wanted to remember. Falcon wasn't just a name. It was a burden. Her fingers curled slightly in her lap now, tightening without her noticing. She caught herself, loosened them again, and exhaled slowly. She was Elena Morris now. Civilian. Retired. Detached from all of it. Or so she told herself. But memories had a way of bleeding into the present. And she couldn't escape the question that returned to her in moments like these, in long flights where silence pressed down too heavily. Had she chosen to leave, or had the name Falcon been taken from her? The last mission replayed in her mind with a clarity that still startled her. The desert sky had been a burning orange at dusk, the kind of color that blurred the line between heaven and fire. She'd been flying point, her F-16 slicing through the atmosphere at supersonic speed. Her orders were simple: surveillance, deterrence, readiness to strike if necessary. She had been Falcon, sharp and focused, heart sensed to the machine beneath her. But then the unexpected came. A coded directive relayed through secure channels. An order that made no sense. One that put her squadron at risk. Falcon had questioned it, her voice sharp with urgency over the radio. She remembered the silence that followed, the hesitation in command's tone. And then she had done what few dared. She had refused. For Falcon, survival was not obedience. For Falcon, protecting her people mattered more than following orders she knew were wrong. And though her squadron had made it home that night because of her defiance, the cost was immediate. Within weeks, she was pulled from active missions. Within months, her wings were clipped, her name erased from rosters, her career finished. They hadn't taken the call sign away from her, they couldn't. But they had made it clear. Falcon had no place in the official skies anymore, and so she became Elena Morris, the civilian, the woman no one noticed, the passenger in 13F. The engines droned on, steady as a heartbeat. Passengers shifted, laughed, complained, ordered drinks. The man beside her had fallen asleep, his head tilted at an awkward angle against the seat. His magazine slid to the floor, but she didn't bother to pick it up. Elena's eyes drifted back to her leather bag at her feet. She touched it gently with the tip of her shoe, a subtle reassurance. Inside was not just luggage. It carried the weight of trust, a sealed military-grade package she had been asked to deliver discreetly. She didn't ask questions anymore. She had agreed because it felt like the least she could do. But in the quiet of the cabin, she wondered why they had called her at all. Why Falcon, after all this time? She leaned back, her heart steady but heavy. She wanted to believe she was done with the sky, done with the games of codes and call signs. But deep down, she knew something no civilian ever truly understood. You never stop being what the skies make of you. And Elena Morris, no matter how she dressed, no matter how quietly she sat in 13F, was still Falcon. The hum of the engines masked the faint flicker on the cockpit's instruments. Far ahead, in an air traffic control room she couldn't see, her forgotten call sign had just been awakened. She didn't know it yet, But Falcon's name was about to be spoken aloud again for the first time in years. The flight was smooth. Passengers shifted into the rhythm of long-haul travel, earbuds in, screens glowing, flight attendants moving quietly down the aisle. Nothing about the cabin suggested danger. Nothing about the night sky hinted at disruption. But high above the Midwest, unseen by those sipping sodas and scrolling through phones, the aircraft's heartbeat had faltered. In the cockpit, Captain Reynolds frowned as a soft chirp broke the monotony of gauges and displays. His first officer leaned forward, scanning the console. One of the secondary transponder screens had flickered, a subtle blink that shouldn't have happened. "Loose wire?" the first officer muttered. Reynolds tapped the panel. The screen steadied, then pulsed again, almost like a coded flash. And then the string of numbers appeared. The captain froze. They weren't normal squawk codes. These were longer, encrypted, carrying the kind of structure that only military systems recognized. He'd flown commercial for 20 years and had never seen anything like it. "What the hell is that?" The first officer shook his head, confusion written all over his face. "It's not us, sir. I didn't enter anything." Reynolds felt a chill creep through him. Then who did? Miles away, in a dimly lit operations room at the Air Traffic Control Center in Kansas City, alarms went off. Not the blaring kind that rattled walls, but the sharper, subtler tones reserved for classified anomalies. Technicians huddled over radar screens. "Confirm that," one said sharply, his voice cutting through the hum of equipment. "Flight 417 just broadcast a restricted code." "That's impossible. Commercial birds don't carry that programming." "Then explain this." On the screen, the transponder pulse repeated, stronger this time. Letters and numbers aligned into a pattern. FLCN07. The technician's mouth went dry. He pushed his chair back and grabbed a phone. Within seconds, his voice was routed through layers of secure lines, climbing the chain of command. NORAD was alerted. At Peterson Air Force Base in Colorado, the operations center snapped to life. Phones rang, screens lit up, voices overlapped in clipped urgency. Unidentified transmission. Commercial aircraft broadcasting military call string. Falcon protocol signature detected. Falcon? A colonel repeated, eyebrows shooting upward. He hadn't heard that name in years. Falcon had been archived, marked inactive, buried, but here it was again, alive in the airspace above the Midwest, tagged to a civilian jet with 200 people aboard. "Get me the intercept." Within minutes, the order was relayed. 2 F-22 Raptors roared to life on the tarmac. Pilots sprinted, helmets under arms, boots pounding against concrete. Engines screamed as afterburners ignited, flames tearing through the night. The Raptors lifted into the sky, banking hard east. Their mission was simple, on paper: intercept, identify, contain. In reality, no one in the command center could define what they were about to face. Back in seat 13F, Elena felt something before the crew did. Not a sound, not a vibration, something else. A shift in the atmosphere, an intuition honed from years of flying combat. The way her body read the air like a second language. She blinked, her gaze flicking to the ceiling panels above. For an instant, she thought she heard it, a faint static crackle of military frequencies brushing against her consciousness. Her hand slipped to the strap of her bag. She told herself she was imagining it, that she was no longer Falcon, no longer tuned to that world. But deep down she knew. Something had found her. In the cockpit, the captain's headset crackled with urgency. "Flight 417, we have unusual transmissions on your signal. Please confirm status." Reynolds gripped the mic. "Kansas City, this is 417. We are operating normally." "Repeat, "We are not transmitting any." The panel blinked again. A second code burst through, overriding him. FLCN07, STBY. The first officer's face drained of color. "It's not us. It's in the system. And where the hell is it coming from?" Reynolds hissed. The question hung heavy. Neither of them had an answer. At 30,000 feet, the night sky held its secrets. The passengers remained blissfully unaware. Children played on tablets, businessmen typed away, and a teenager leaned against the window, pointing at the faint outline of city lights far below. Only Elena sat rigid, her every nerve aware of what the pilots couldn't see yet. Somewhere out there, she knew, Raptors were coming. And they would be looking for one thing. Her. The first officer glanced nervously at the radar scope. "Sir, do you see that?" Two fast-moving blips, closing in from the west. The captain tightened his grip on the controls. Fighters. Why would fighters? The question trailed off. They both knew the answer. Far above the patchwork of sleeping towns, the F-22 Raptors streaked through the night. Their pilots, call signs Viper and Ghost, spoke in clipped tones over secure comms. Target in sight. Locking visual. Copy. Confirm tail. Civilian passenger jet, Flight 417, standing by for instructions. As they closed the distance, their HUDs lit with telemetry. The transponder pinged again, sharp and clear. Falcon. Both pilots stiffened. They had heard the stories in training, the legends whispered about an ace who had vanished. But stories belonged in books, not in the digital heart of a commercial jet's systems. "Command, this is Viper. Falcon code confirmed." "Repeat. Falcon code confirmed." "Silence, then. Maintain visual. Await further orders." Elena's heartbeat was steady, but her mind raced. She could almost feel the Raptor's presence outside, even before the passengers noticed the sleek silhouettes gliding parallel to the jet. She knew what they were seeing on their instruments. She knew why they had come. Her eyes dropped once more to the leather bag at her feet. Something inside was calling. Not to her, but through her. She pressed her palm against it, as if that could silence the signal. But she knew it couldn't. The sky had already recognized Falcon. And Falcon, whether she liked it or not, was back in play. The first to notice were the children. A boy pressed against the window, his small hands leaving smudges on the glass as he shouted, "Look, fighter jets!" His sister squealed and craned her neck to see. Their parents laughed softly, thinking it was some harmless escort, perhaps a military drill. But in the cockpit, Captain Reynolds knew better. Fighter jets didn't simply appear at altitude alongside a commercial airliner unless something was seriously wrong. His stomach tightened as the sleek, predatory outlines of the Raptors slid into formation, one on the left wing, one on the right, both so close he could almost read the markings on their fuselages. "Jesus," the first officer whispered. "They're F-22s. Reynolds' headset crackled. "Flight 417. You are being intercepted by U.S. Air Force aircraft. Maintain current heading and speed. Acknowledge." The captain responded with forced calm. "Copy. Maintaining heading and speed." His hand hovered near the throttle, but he knew better than to make any sudden moves. He glanced at his co-pilot, their eyes silently trading the same thought. Why? In Kansas City's control room, the air was electric. A supervisor leaned over the technician's shoulder, eyes narrowed at the scrolling data. "They confirmed the code again," the technician said grimly. "Falcon protocol is active." The supervisor picked up the phone, his voice sharp as steel. "Patch me to NORAD, right now." In the F-22 cockpit, Viper squinted through his visor. The HUD kept flashing the same tag, FLCN07. He'd heard the stories during training flights, mythic tales about a pilot who had been the best of her generation. Fearless and cunning, who vanished into silence after refusing an impossible order. Falcon was a ghost, a legend. Yet here she was, alive in their systems. Ghost, his wingman, broke the silence. "Viper, you seeing this?" "Affirm. It's no mistake. Falcon's not supposed to exist. Tell that to my HUD." Back in seat 13F, Elena had not moved, though her body was alive with awareness. Through the narrow window, she could see the outline of the jet sleek, silent, lethal, matching their pace with the precision of a predator circling prey. Gasps rippled through the cabin. Passengers fumbled for phones, snapping blurry pictures. Some murmured nervously, others chuckled with excitement, pretending it was a novelty. But Elena knew. This wasn't an escort. This was a recognition. Her eyes shifted to the overhead speaker as the captain's voice came through, carefully steady. "Ladies and gentlemen, you may have noticed 2 military aircraft flying alongside us. This is a standard precaution, and there is no cause for alarm. Please remain in your seats." The words calmed some, but not all. And not Elena. She knew lies when she heard them. Her hand slid subtly to her bag. She didn't unzip it yet, but her fingers rested against the warm leather as if bracing for impact. In the cockpit of the Raptor, Viper's radio buzzed with a directive from NORAD. "Viper, attempt authentication." "Repeat, attempt authentication." Viper switched channels. "Unidentified transmitter aboard Flight 417. This is Viper. Respond with Falcon authentication code." There was silence. The airliner crew looked at each other, baffled. They hadn't touched their radios, yet the channel carried a faint hum. Then, without warning, the panel flickered again. Off. Falcon. A pause. Steetby. Viper's breath caught. "Ghost, did you see that?" Loud and clear. Elena closed her eyes. She didn't need to see the panel. She didn't need to hear the Raptor's chatter. She felt it. Her call sign, her other self, was speaking again. The signal wasn't coming from the cockpit. It was coming from her bag. The transceiver inside was alive now, drawing recognition codes from satellites she thought had gone dormant years ago. Someone had planned this. Someone had forced her ghost back into the world. Her jaw clenched. Falcon wasn't supposed to fly again. And yet, here she was summoned, exposed, recognized at 30,000 feet. The passengers buzzed with speculation. A businessman leaned over the aisle to whisper, "Must be some kind of terrorist threat." A woman behind him shook her head. No. I saw this in a movie once. They're probably escorting us because of the president or something." Phones lit up, faces pressed to glass. People grinned nervously, treating it like an in-flight entertainment show. They didn't know that legends were circling above them, that history had just cracked open in the sky. Only Elena understood the truth, and she hated how calm she felt. In NORAD's command room, senior officers argued in clipped voices. Falcon was decommissioned. Apparently not. That's her code. Do we have ID on who's on that aircraft? Not yet. Passenger manifest is being cross-checked. Cross-check faster. On the main screen, the image of Flight 417 was tagged, circled, tracked like prey under surveillance. The words burned across the status log. Falcon active. The Raptors held steady, their wings glittering under the faint moonlight. Their presence was a warning and a question. Who was on board? And why was Falcon awake again? Elena pressed her forehead lightly against the window, letting the cool glass ground her. Memories surged her last flight as Falcon, the betrayal that ended her career, the silence that followed. She had promised herself she would never be part of this world again. But the sky never let go of its own. Now, with 2 Raptors at her side, she knew what the message meant. Falcon had been recognized, and recognition was the same as resurrection. The hum of the engines filled the cabin, but for Elena, the sound felt different now, louder, sharper, like the whole aircraft had become a stage spotlighting her secret. Around her, passengers still chatted nervously, pointing phones at the Raptors outside. But their voices faded into a blur as she lowered her gaze to the worn leather satchel at her feet. Her fingers curled against the strap. Inside, the object she'd been told to carry discreetly was no harmless delivery. She had suspected, of course. People like her always suspected. But suspicion was nothing compared to confirmation. The transceiver wasn't dormant. It was alive, broadcasting, calling her back into a world she thought she'd abandoned. Falcon. The word echoed in her mind, heavy with memories of skies she never wanted to revisit. In the cockpit, Captain Reynolds was running out of composure. The encrypted signal had pinged again on his secondary comms, a code his airline systems shouldn't even recognize. His first officer, pale-faced, leaned back in his seat. "What the hell is Falcon?" he whispered. Reynolds didn't answer. He didn't have one. But he knew the presence of Raptors wasn't about him, wasn't about his crew. It was about someone or something on board. Then the command came over the secure channel. Flight 417. Prepare for reroute. Maintain altitude. Course adjustment pending. Reynolds swallowed hard. Acknowledged. Reroute. That was no routine escort. This was extraction. At NORAD, the tension in the command center had turned electric. A general leaned over the console, eyes locked on the data feed. "Confirm again, this isn't some hacker spoof?" "Negative, sir," the technician replied. "The signal is authenticated through Falcon's old network clearance. It's not fake. It's not stolen. It's real." The general's jaw tightened. Falcon had been erased from active files years ago. The last mission classified, the pilot's record sealed. And yet, here it was blinking at him like a ghost refusing to die. Scrub the manifest. Who's on that plane? Names scrolled. Elena Morris. Age 41. Civilian. Teacher's license. Normal. Too normal. The general's gut twisted. Sometimes the most ordinary names were the ones hiding the sharpest edges. Back in seat 13F, Elena inhaled slowly, steadying herself. Her military training, buried beneath years of silence, awakened like muscle memory. Scan, assess, decide. She was boxed in, Raptors outside, a full cabin inside. If she drew attention, panic would erupt. If she stayed quiet, she risked losing control of the situation entirely. The transceiver wasn't supposed to be hers forever. An old colleague and analyst from her Falcon days had begged her to transport it, swearing it was just a dead relic, a symbolic piece of old hardware needed for declassification. But relics didn't summon Raptors at 30,000 feet. Her jaw clenched. Someone had lied. Row 12, across the aisle, a man in a gray jacket kept glancing at her. Elena noticed, of course, she did. His eyes weren't curious like the others. They were sharp, deliberate, watching. She met his gaze for half a second, and in that moment, she knew. He wasn't just another passenger. Her instincts screamed. He knew who she was. The intercom chimed. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We'll be making a slight course adjustment due to air traffic considerations. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." The passengers groaned, muttered, some rolled their eyes. But Elena heard what he didn't say. She read the nervous tremor behind his practiced calm. They were being rerouted. Not for traffic. For her. In the Raptors, Viper's voice cut through the channel. "Command wants positive ID. We're not pulling them down without confirmation." Ghost responded, skeptical. You think Falcon's really in there? Viper hesitated. The signal says yes. But if it is, why now? Why here? Doesn't add up, Ghost muttered. Nothing about Falcon ever did. Elena shifted slightly, her heart steadying with each beat. Years ago, she would have let fear drive her reflexes. Now, she understood fear differently. It wasn't a weakness, it was information. Fear told her what mattered most. She had to decide, reveal herself to the crew and Raptors, or keep playing the invisible passenger. But the decision was made for her. A man in the gray jacket stood up. "Excuse me," he said too loudly, reaching into his pocket. A flight attendant rushed over. "Sir, please remain seated." In one motion, he produced a slim device. Not a weapon. A scanner. It beeped instantly, locking on her bag. Every nerve in Elena's body tightened like wire. The cabin buzzed with confusion. "What's he doing?" Someone whispered. A teenager pulled out his phone, recording. The scanner beeped again, louder this time. The man's eyes flicked to hers. Cold. Calculated. He had found it. The transceiver. Elena's hand was already on the strap. Training took over. In a single smooth movement, she pulled the bag into her lap. "Sit down," she told him, her voice low but laced with command. For a moment, he hesitated, perhaps shocked by the authority in her tone. Around them, passengers stared, frozen between curiosity and fear. Then he smiled thinly. "Falcon," he said. The word cut through her like shrapnel. The cabin went dead silent. Passengers looked between them, bewildered. Falcon? What did that mean? But for Elena, the recognition was final. Her ghost wasn't just alive, it was hunted. In the cockpit, a secure message came through from NORAD. Target confirmed on board. Falcon designation authenticated. Prepare for military diversion. Captain Reynolds turned pale. "Dear God," he whispered. "What the hell do we have on this plane?" Back in the cabin, Elena knew the answer. She had it in her hands. A transceiver pulsing with secrets too heavy for civilians to carry. Her secret was out, and Falcon had officially returned. The word hung in the air like smoke. Falcon. Passengers looked around, confused. Some chuckled nervously, thinking it was a joke or a nickname. Others furrowed their brows, sensing there was more to it than they understood. But for Elena, the word was a blade cutting through years of silence. It left her exposed, stripped of the ordinary life she had built. The man in the gray jacket held her gaze, unflinching. His scanner still blinked red, locked onto the signal from her satchel. He didn't move closer, but he didn't need to. His single word had done the damage. A flight attendant broke the silence. "Sir, please sit down right now or I'll—" But she faltered. She had seen Elena's face, the sudden change in her posture, the way she gripped the bag. It wasn't the panic of a cornered woman. It was the steadiness of someone trained, someone in control, even under fire. Elena exhaled slowly, then stood. The cabin seemed to shrink around her as every eye turned in her direction. "It's all right," she said quietly. "He's not wrong." A ripple moved through the passengers. Whispers spread like wildfire. "Falcon? What's Falcon?" Phones recorded, lenses capturing her every movement. Elena ignored them all. She was no longer Elena Morris, the quiet woman in 13F. She was Falcon again. In the cockpit, the secure line buzzed urgently. Flight 417, patch the signal to Falcon. Repeat patch comes to Falcon directly. Captain Reynolds stared at the handset, baffled. "Falcon? You mean her?" "Yes, Captain," the voice snapped. "We don't need you anymore. Put her on." The co-pilot muttered, "What the hell is going on out there?" But Reynolds had no choice. He turned to the head flight attendant, who stood frozen at the cockpit door. "Find her. Whoever the hell Falcon is, bring her up here." Meanwhile, outside at 30,000 feet, the Raptors adjusted their formation. Viper's voice came through clipped, professional, but tinged with awe. "Command confirms Falcon is on board. We need direct voice verification." Ghost chuckled, a low, disbelieving sound. "Falcon? I thought she was a myth." "Not a myth," Viper said, watching the civilian airliner through his canopy. "A ghost that refuses to stay buried." Elena didn't wait for anyone to drag her forward. She stepped into the aisle, her bag slung over her shoulder, moving with the unhurried stride of someone who had once walked across hangar floors with generals at her side. The gray-jacketed man didn't try to stop her. He only watched with a faint smirk, as if pleased to see the pieces falling into place. Passengers parted for her without speaking, their eyes wide. Some looked frightened, others curious, but none dared stand in her way. When she reached the cockpit door, the head flight attendant swallowed nervously. They want you." Elena gave a single nod. "I know." Inside, the cockpit felt smaller than she remembered, tighter than the fighter jets she used to call home. The captain looked up at her, bewildered. "You're Falcon?" he asked. "Not anymore," she replied. "But for them." She glanced at the Raptors outside. "Yes." She took the handset, her hand steady. For a moment, she closed her eyes, inhaled, and when she spoke, the voice that came out was not Helena's. It was Falcon's, calm, commanding, clipped in the way only a combat pilot's could be. "This is Falcon." Standing by. The Raptor's cockpits fell silent. Viper froze, the voice ringing in his ears. It was unmistakable. The cadence, the steel beneath the words, no simulation could replicate that. "Ghost," he said softly. "It's her." No RAD's command center erupted with voices. Analysts scribbled, officers barked orders, screens lit up with red alerts. For the first time in years, Falcon's voice was back on their channels. The general leaned forward. "She's alive." "Falcon," came the voice over combs, clipped and official. "You've been dark for years. Why are you transmitting?" Elena's jaw tightened. "I'm not transmitting. Something in my possession is. Without my consent." The general exchanged a glance with his aides. That complicated everything. "What is the device?" "A transceiver tied to Falcon protocols," she said. "Old network, long since shut down." "Or so I thought." Her words cut like blades through the control room. If the Falcon network was awake again, it meant someone had reactivated a black operation, most believed buried. In the cockpit, Captain Reynolds listened, stunned. He felt like an intruder hearing classified ghosts whisper over his own aircraft. Elena Falcon stood straight, her voice steady, giving away nothing of the storm inside her. "You rerouted this flight," she said flatly. "So tell me where we're going." "Secure facility," the voice replied. "Your presence is required immediately." "I didn't volunteer." "Doesn't matter. Falcon is reactivated." Elena's grip on the handset tightened. She had sworn never to let them pull her back. She had walked away from the Air Force, not because she lacked loyalty, but because loyalty had been twisted, weaponized, used against her until she could no longer serve with honor. And yet here she was, summoned mid-air by a device she hadn't asked for, flanked by Raptors, her name spoken like a commandment. Falcon was back whether she wanted it or not. The first officer broke the silence, whispering to Reynolds. "Captain, are we safe?" Reynolds didn't answer. He didn't know. The safest man in the sky right now wasn't the one with his hands on the controls. It was the quiet woman standing behind him, steady as stone, staring into ghosts only she could see. In the cabin, tension grew. Passengers had seen her walk forward, had heard the strange word whispered. Phones kept rolling, capturing fragments of history no one would understand until much later. A man in the gray jacket leaned back, satisfied. His job wasn't to stop her. It was to make sure Falcon resurfaced. And now she had. Elena lowered the handset, her voice quiet but firm. You wanted Falcon? You've got her. But understand this Falcon doesn't fly blind. Her words weren't for the Raptors, not for NORAD, not even for the captain beside her. They were for the unseen architects who had forced her hand, who had reactivated the ghost of a call sign she had buried. If they wanted Falcon back, they'd have to face everything she carried, the truth of her past, the betrayal that drove her away, and the fury she'd spent years trying to silence. The confrontation wasn't over. It had only just begun. The order came down from NORAD like thunder. Flight 417. Divert immediately. Coordinates uploading now. Comply without delay. In the cockpit, Captain Reynolds felt his throat go dry. He had spent 20 years flying commercial routes, had seen storms, fuel shortages, even a medical emergency that forced a landing in the middle of nowhere. But never this. Never two Raptors babysitting. His wings while the government demanded he steer 200 passengers toward an unnamed runway. He glanced sideways at Elena, who stood steady with the handset still in her grip. Her expression gave nothing away, but her silence spoke louder than words. This is about her. Roger that, Reynolds muttered, adjusting the heading. The aircraft banked gently, turning east. Passengers murmured in confusion, craning their necks to peer out at the unexpected maneuver. In the cabin, rumors swirled like wildfire. We're being hijacked. No, it's a military escort. Probably VIP on board. My brother's in the Air Force. This doesn't happen unless there's a major threat. Dozens of phones recorded, capturing shaky footage of Raptors gleaming in the moonlight. But Elena barely heard them. Her focus locked onto the man in the gray jacket. He hadn't moved since outing her. He sat calmly, hands folded, watching her every step back from the cockpit. The way he observed, not aggressive, not fearful, told her everything. He was part of this. A handler. Maybe even the one who had slipped the transceiver into her possession through that old colleague. Her jaw tightened. The game was larger than she had realized. The flight attendant's voice tried to keep the illusion alive. Ladies and gentlemen, due to some unexpected air traffic patterns, we'll be making a quick diversion before resuming our course. There's no cause for concern. But concern was already spreading like smoke. Mothers tightened their grip on children. Businessmen tapped nervously on phones that had lost signal. Whispers filled the air like static. And through it all, Elena sat quietly in 13F, her satchel in her lap, her mind running battle drills. She knew what was coming. Extraction was never gentle. On the Raptors channel, Viper checked in. Ghost, we're 15 minutes out from the secure strip. Copy. You think she's coming willingly? She doesn't have a choice, Viper replied. But in his gut, he wondered. Falcon had been a legend not just because of her skill, but because of her defiance. She didn't play by anyone's rules, not even her own side's. If they thought she'd simply walk off that plane and salute, they didn't know the Falcon he'd studied in dusty academy briefings. At NORAD, the general stood rigid before the main display. The glowing dot of Flight 417 crawled toward the new coordinates. She confirmed possession of the transceiver, an aide reported. Does she know why it's active? Negative. But sir? The aide hesitated. If Falcon's network is live again, it means someone reactivated a program buried for over a decade. Someone with high clearance. The general's face hardened. Then we're not just recovering Falcon. We're recovering whoever pulled her back into play. The descent began 30 minutes later. The captain announced it casually, as if they were landing for fuel. Passengers peered out to see nothing, no city lights, no airport glow, only endless dark plains beneath them. A few whispered nervously, "Where are we?" Then suddenly, the ground lit up in a perfect rectangle floodlights, igniting a hidden airfield that had not existed on any civilian map. The airliner touched down smoothly, tires screeching against a runway few had ever seen. Within seconds, armored vehicles flanked the tarmac, their headlights slicing through the dark. The Raptors peeled away, circling like hawks, ensuring their prey had landed. Gasps filled the cabin as passengers spotted the armored convoy outside. A boy pressed to the window shouted, "Are those tanks?" His mother yanked him back, pale with fear. The intercom chimed again. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our temporary stop. We'll remain here briefly before continuing to our destination. Please stay seated until further notice." But the illusion had collapsed. Nobody believed this was routine anymore. The first person they came for was Elena. A uniformed officer in black tactical gear entered the cabin, helmet tucked under one arm, his eyes scanning like radar until they locked onto her. He walked straight down the aisle without hesitation. "Falcon," he said quietly, but firmly. "You'll come with us." The cabin fell into stunned silence. The name was spoken openly now, stripped of secrecy. Dozens of phones recorded the surreal exchange, though many hands trembled too much to hold them steady. Elena stood without argument. Her bag remained on her shoulder, but she didn't move until she glanced once more at the man in the gray jacket. He was still seated, calm as ever, giving her the faintest nod as if to say, "You were never supposed to escape this." Her blood simmered. Stepping into the jet bridge, Elena was swallowed by a corridor of black-clad operatives. Their formation moved like a wall around her, blocking the view of curious passengers peering through the cabin door. Outside, the night air was sharp with fuel and steel. Armored trucks idled, engines rumbling. Floodlights bathed the runway in stark white, casting long shadows. She had walked onto many tarmacs in her life, but this one felt different. She wasn't walking out as a pilot, or even as a soldier. She was walking out as a piece of classified material being retrieved. The general waited at the base of the convoy. He was tall, silver-haired, his face carved from years of command. "Falcon," he greeted, his tone more acknowledgement than welcome. Elena stopped a few feet away, her eyes narrowing. "I don't answer to that name anymore." "Tonight you do," he replied evenly. His gaze flicked to the bag on her shoulder. "Hand it over." Her grip tightened on the strap. "Not until I know who reactivated it." "You think I don't see the setup? You put me in that cabin with a tracker, a handler watching from across the aisle. That wasn't chance. That was orchestration." The general's jaw clenched, but he didn't deny it. "This isn't your fight anymore," he said. Elena's voice dropped, cold as steel. "Then why drag me back into it?" Around them, soldiers bristled with tension, their rifles angled low but ready. The convoy engines growled. The Raptors thundered overhead one last time before veering away into the night. Elena felt the weight of every eye, every floodlight, every unseen camera capturing her return to a world she had abandoned. She lifted the satchel slowly, deliberately. The bag that carried not just a transceiver, but the key to unlocking a program someone desperately wanted back in play. And with it, she carried a warning. "If Falcon is back," she said quietly, "then the war you buried isn't finished." Her words hung in the night, heavier than the roar of engines, heavier than the floodlights burning down. And for the first time, the general's eyes betrayed what she already knew. He was afraid. The floodlights burned into Elena's eyes as she stepped from the jet bridge onto the secure tarmac. Soldiers flanked her on all sides, their presence a silent reminder. This was no ordinary extraction. The weight of history pressed down on her shoulders, heavier than any G-force she had felt in the cockpit. The general waited at the edge of the convoy, his tall frame rigid under the harsh lights. Elena's satchel hung at her side, the subtle hum of the transceiver beneath her fingers like a heartbeat she hadn't heard in years. She had carried this device half her life, thinking it inert, forgotten, buried in dusty archives. Now she knew better. "This isn't just about the device," the general said, his voice low. "Someone reactivated Falcon protocols. You've been pulled back because your skills, your judgment. Your name still matters." Elena's eyes narrowed. "So someone thought they could use me, pull me out of obscurity for a mission they didn't dare attempt themselves." The general said nothing. He didn't need to. She already knew. Inside a waiting hangar, she was finally allowed to examine the transceiver. It was deceptively simple, a small metallic box, no bigger than a lunch pail. But she knew better. Every inch of it contained lines of code, encrypted channels, and network access that could trigger operations across multiple continents. Her fingers traced the edges. She remembered the missions she had flown as Falcon, the decisions that had saved lives and condemned others. The weight of responsibility was nothing new, but this was different. Now, she wasn't just flying a jet. She was carrying the power to restart an entire covert network. The gray-jacketed man appeared beside her again. Unlike before, he didn't speak. He only observed, his calm eyes reflecting the lights and shadows of the hangar. He was a handler, a guardian, perhaps even a test. Elena didn't trust him, but she understood him immediately. "They trust you," she said quietly. "More than me, apparently." He tilted his head. No answer. "Good," she continued, "because I won't be their pawn. I'll make the call. I'll decide the operation, or nothing happens at all." The man nodded once. Finally, she had the measure of him. The general stepped closer, urgency in his tone. "Falcon, we need a report. The transceiver is active. Whoever reactivated it is using it to transmit commands to sleeper units worldwide. If we don't intercept it, the consequences could be catastrophic." Elena's eyes flared. "Sleeper units? They think they can control me from a distance? That's why they activated the device, but it's mine now." Her mind raced. Years of experience, every mission replaying like a high-speed simulation. She understood the network, the operators, the hidden signals. The transceiver was a key, and she would decide which doors it opened. "I will handle it," she said, calm but unyielding. "But only on my terms. I'm Falcon. That's not a warning. It's a fact." In the distance, the Raptors circled overhead. Viper and Ghost's HUDs monitored the hangar's perimeter, but they weren't needed anymore. Falcon was in control. She had been summoned, tested, recognized, and she had passed. Elena took a deep breath. The hangar doors opened, revealing a sleek, black operations vehicle waiting. Soldiers stood ready, but their eyes shifted to her, the unspoken acknowledgement clear. This was her domain now. She slid into the driver's seat, satchel in her lap, and exhaled. Her life had changed forever. She was no longer just a civilian. She was a legend, a weapon, a strategist. Falcon had returned. The general followed, his tone quieter now, more reflective. "You could have refused." "I did refuse once," she replied, "and it cost lives. I won't make that mistake again. But now I decide the terms. Not you, not the man who reactivated the network, not anyone who thinks they can manipulate the past." Her fingers tightened on the satchel, feeling the hum of the transceiver beneath her palm. For the first time in years, it felt like a tool of power rather than a burden. as the convoy moved silently across the tarmac. Elena thought of the passengers still aboard, Flight 417. They would never know the storm that had passed over them, the shadow war that had circled 30,000 feet above their heads. Their lives were untouched, oblivious, unaware that a legend had been recognized and returned. She allowed herself a small smile. They didn't need to know. Some battles were fought in the clouds, in codes and call signs, in silence. Falcon had lived in the shadows, and she would remain there, but this time on her terms. The gray-jacketed man finally spoke, his voice quiet but firm. "You're back in the game. They won't forget you. The world isn't ready for Falcon again." She looked at him, eyes steel. "Then they better learn quickly, because Falcon doesn't wait. She acts, and anyone who underestimates her will regret it." The vehicle rolled onto a hidden runway. Floodlights reflected off the transceiver in her lap. Every line of code, every dormant channel, whispered of missions yet to come. Falcon's name was no longer a memory. It was alive. And so was she. High above, the Raptors circled one final time before breaking formation. Their silhouettes vanished into the darkness. But down below, in the hangar and inside the black vehicle, a new chapter had begun. One written in secrecy, strategy, and the legacy of a pilot who refused to die quietly. Elena exhaled, letting the weight of the night settle into her bones. She was ready. The call sign wasn't just a ghost from the past, it was her future. And Falcon had returned to claim it.